Based on our knowledge of linguistic history, we can say with certainty that language is a dynamic entity. A language undergoes changes in terms of its lexicon, syntax, and semantics. In this module, we'll take a look at how grammatical rules of English are changed, or how these rules are changed in different varieties of English. When it comes to investigating grammatical rules in different varieties of English, different areas of research are possible. Two of these include subject-verb agreement and variation in grammar. Substantial research has been done in these two areas of research in terms of grammar. Before looking at a research study based on subject-verb agreement rule, let's take a look at what subject-verb agreement actually is. According to Quirk et al., English speakers are often rather uncertain about the rules of a concord, and concord is agreement. It's not only the rules of concord. The grammatical rules are often confusing. Many speakers of a language, especially English, find these rules confusing, especially learners of English. The confusion is caused by, one, that there are so many rules, and then second, there are so many rules and then there are as many exceptions. And there are not only rules, then there are also subparts of each rule. So because of all these reasons, speakers of English are never sure actually about their selection of a particular rule or their judgments about the grammaticality of their sentences or the language that they are using. Before looking at the study in subject-verb agreement, let's take a look at this rule of subject-verb agreement. According to this rule, subjects and verbs must agree with one another in number and person. Now, what do we mean by number and person? Let's take a look at the first sentence, I are on the bus. This is, of course, an incorrect sentence in English. It is incorrect because the subject I does not agree with the verb are in number or person. I is a singular and are is a plural verb, so I cannot take are. That's one thing. The other is the singular I, the first person singular I, cannot take a singular verb is or a plural verb are. So it's not that it cannot take are, it cannot take is either. So I is on the bus is also incorrect, and I are on the bus is also incorrect because here the subject does not agree with the verb in number and person. Whereas I am on the bus is correct because the subject I agrees with the verb am in terms of both number and person. Similarly, Ali and Nida am with me is again incorrect. Ali and Nida are third person singular, and the conjunction and compounds the noun and it becomes plural. So Ali and Nida are with me will be correct because Ali and Nida now become plural, and third person plural will take are and not am. So Ali and Nida are with me here. The compound subject Ali and Nida, because of the use of the word and, Ali and Nida have become plural, and therefore they should take the verb are. Another example of subjects and verbs agreeing in number and person will be the student is in the cafeteria. The singular subject, the student, agrees with the verb is, so this is correct. Similarly, the students are in the cafeteria. Here the subject is plural, therefore it takes a plural verb. In terms of number and in terms of person, the students, third person plural, must take a plural verb and the verb are and not any other verb. So we can summarize the rule as a singular subject demands a singular verb, a plural subject demands a plural verb. This is how we can summarize the subject-verb agreement rule. this looks quite straightforward. The confusion starts when we start looking at the other, let's say, the subparts of this rule. So there are other general rules of subject-verb agreement, which are called the rule of the notional agreement and the rule of proximity agreement. Now, what does this mean? A notional agreement is the kind of agreement where the verb agrees with the subject even when there are no markers of number present. For example, we show plurality of a noun in English with the use of the word as. So even when the subject does not show any plurality because of lack of the letter s, it still will agree with the verb in terms of notion if it belongs to a notional category which is plural. So if the notional category is plural, even when it does not look like a plural subject, it will agree with the verb as a plural subject. For example, the orchestra are tuning their instruments. The orchestra sounds like a singular word, but it is a collective noun, which means that an orchestra comprises a large set of different people. Therefore, we consider it a collective noun. So even though there's no S on orchestra, we still consider it a plural noun, and in that way, the verb that it takes is are. So the orchestra are tuning their instruments. Similarly, staff is a collective noun, therefore it will also take a plural verb. The staff disagree on the proposal. The same goes for the word crew, which again comprises different individuals. So the crew were preparing for the launch. So we see that here we see subjects which apparently look singular. They do not look plural because they lack the letter S, which denotes plurality in English. Still, they take a plural verb. And it is such rules which cause confusion in language learners and sometimes even native speakers. Similarly, there are certain nouns which look plural because of the presence of S at the end. However, notionally, they belong to the category of singular nouns. So if such a noun acts as the subject of a sentence, it should take a singular verb and not a plural verb. For example, the word politics. So in a sentence like politics is best not discussed at the dinner table, the verb which is appropriate is because politics conceptually is a singular noun. So we see that in English we have a subject-verb agreement rule, but then because of the subparts of the rule, there are likely to be lots of uncertainties by the users of this rule, which include both the native speakers and non-native English speakers.